Hey everybody, it's Daniel with Tier 11. Welcome to another episode of the Customer Acquisition Show. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. We are going to take a look back at some of our favorite segments from our favorite episodes here. We're going to be covering everything from AI to Google ads, Facebook ads, brand awareness, and much more. So grab your popcorn, grab your coffee, whatever you need, and let's get started.
I think this is actually a good start to this topic, and I'm happy to go down this route quite a while.
Yeah.
Like even how you guys are using Google AI. But to answer your question, Ollie, yeah, I've got a lot of like prompts and save prompts. I'll even use them in like a text expander for something that I use on a repeatable basis.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I created in Notion. I can share with you if you want. It's like I created in Notion. You have a database, and it's not. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I've actually been using. Have you been using Anthropic at all, Claude?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for long content, but it's more for content creation because it allows me to do 5K text easier than with ChatGPT.
Yeah, I've been using that a lot. I like that one a lot. I don't know if I like it more. They're kind of like different use cases. I find I have like different use cases for each of the AIs. Like Bard, I use for like how I'd want to ask a question of Google. ChatGPT is like my writing partner, and then Claude is somebody like somebody I always want to outsource longer form stuff to.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that for Google Ads, I like Bard for keyword research because it belongs to Google. So normally the research for the keywords are better than on OpenAI and ChatGPT, etc. So, yeah,
so
every app is a usage.
Talk about how you're using Bard for Google keywords, like a bit more specifically.
I would try to search more long tail keywords by using Bard. So I would feed a little bit and then use my prompt to search, for example, 10 keywords that are related, but long tail for maximum 3 or 4 keywords. And I will ask him to and continue. It's more kind of a conversation, but you can find some gems. So really keywords. Oh, this one I could use it. So it for Google Ads, and also when you want to write some content on some ads, it can give you some ideas. So it's more specific, yeah, really for Google Ads. If I have to do my research, I'd rather use Bard. But for creating, I'd rather use ChatGPT. It's like you said, every AI has its usage, but I'm afraid to multiply a little bit too much. But it's like I'm gonna have to pay
ChatGPT. With ChatGPT, it's also about getting the right prompts. Like, for example, if I am, selling something and I have 5 kinds of avatar, now it's not about like which keyword you test. It's also the what intents do you test more with the keywords.
Yeah, so.
And that's where you can really ask ChatGPT that just imagine you're that buyer persona. What would you put in? Like what variety and how would you put up a query with different intents, and then you can get a lesson. So that gets you, what the buyer intention across different personas would be. And so, that prompt part with the AI is really important. If you have the right prompts, you can actually do a lot. Otherwise, a simple thing like give me keyword list of this, it's basic stuff. So you have to level up your game. You can actually do really well with ChatGPT.
Have you?
I type. Yeah. Sorry. Go on, Tom. So sorry.
No, I was gonna say, have you guys used the custom instructions in ChatGPT yet?
Yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Not me.
Yeah. I have a list also for every persona. So every profile I want to start with. So if I okay, I'm a media buyer. I'm searching for a keyword, some list of keywords. So I prepare in the instruction, and you have to follow this. Yeah, yeah. What I regret is there's no individual one, so you have to redo every time. That's what I regret for now. Yeah.
I almost feel like getting individual ChatGPT logins for each custom.
Yeah. It's true. That's the only part that's annoying, but it's already good like this. So.
Yeah. So Robson, you were talking a little bit earlier about how you were using ChatGPT for like not having to go back and forth with clients and other stuff. Can you talk a little bit more specific about kind of your workflow there and what you're using it for?
So a lot of time what happens, especially if it's the campaign creative oriented a lot, like images and videos, we have different angles, hooks, and like, the targeting variations. Like this is the version 1, 2, 3, 4. We have it in our minds. What we have to do is we have to put it together in terms of like the creative brief and get back to the designer. They'll give us something and then we'll go to the client, try to show and try to get suggestions. But now it's like I don't need the designer there, like probably some little tweaks that AI fails to get me. But like I know what I really want to test. Like this is the avatar I want to go after. Then I'll just put it into my journey, get some variations. Like this is what I'm looking at, the feel of the creative. It's like, with that, and then quickly show it to the client. So that that time in between saves a lot. Like it's sometimes it's the iteration part of between, what you have in your mind, what client expects, and so that back and forth is something that's just the best thing I've found so far.
Nice. Yeah. I recently used ChatGPT for coming up with some creative ideas. So if you start to see there's a new video, I think we're running ads for it, of Ralph using soccer as an analogy for full funnel marketing, or football for all the internationals. I asked that came from a list of ideas from ChatGPT. I was looking for. I asked it basically to come up with analogies for full funnel marketing, and it gave me a list. Most of them were not very good, but some of them like really kind of hit home, and like we could build upon that. And I think it's really, for me, is a really strong creative part. It's a good creative partner for me. Like,
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah,
Because of the creative iterations, we through what really worked, and we put in more variations of things which have worked for us. In that also, the AI tools help us provide variations if we have right prompts. Like if this worked, why is it work? And this is the direction we want to create variations into. So you help us out in that. So it's like dream come true, I would say, because you don't have the idea of blockage, like, oh my God, what should be the next variation or the next test? You just flow. You learn from it and you quickly deliver things on the client end.
I agreed. How about Chat GPT Code Interpreter? Are you guys using that for any sort of data analysis?
yeah. I was
I've not done
tempted to do it with Excel sheet, but I haven't tried yet. It's so overwhelming nowadays. We are saving time, but every time I save time, I learn something else, and I'm like, oh, I have to watch that and then learn how to do that. So the code interpreter, I think I used it for one or two things, but I wanted to try, uploading an Excel sheet and then ask him to analyze specific column and things like that. Still have to do. It's on my to-do list.
I know my Twitter feed is like full of like somewhat nerdy AI people and just the new stuff that's always coming out. Like,
Yeah.
I want to get my own llama.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Every day
Yeah,
you wake up, there's a new exciting AI in the market, really. And then it's really hard. For me, it's really hard to keep up with all the tools that are coming in the market. So I just test the ones which are like really popular and can help me with my media buying. Otherwise, it's really distracting, honestly.
Yeah.
I know. And my problem is I like the ChatGPT for my work, but I like a side of my work, and then I like Midjourney, and then it's completely overwhelming. It's like, but it's a nice era. It's like, I don't know. It's an era for me. It's like gonna change everything. So
For sure.
we learn.
I mean, even Midjourney now has their in painting tool where you can modify. That was always the biggest problem with Midjourney, is you had to like nail the prompt. Now you can always just kind of iterate on like the image it puts out.
You can use ChatGPT to do the prompt for you also.
I know.
If you
Yeah, with Code Interpreter, as an agency, we have to be somewhat careful about what we can and can't upload because our clients.
Sure. Yeah.
But I did we're doing some new ad testing for Tier 11 marketing, testing, really leaning into the idea that we've been talking a lot about of the different phases of awareness, consideration, and conversion. So what I did is I took all of the CSV files for the performance of our different social posts across Meta and YouTube, fed those into Code Interpreter, and asked it to predict which of these socials would be better at each stage of the customer journey. And it went through this whole list of like, awareness, you have to really be focused on like average view length, total impressions. So it picked the top videos or social posts based off of those criteria. Then it was like consideration. It's like, well, here we want to pick videos that have high engagement, comments, shares, and all that, and picked a set of videos for there. And then for conversion, it was basing it off of click-through rates, because there's not really a whole lot of conversion data on social media. So it was pretty interesting how it like used everything that it's built on to take a massive amount of information and give me 5 things that I would have spent tons of time just going through and making guesses on my own.
Yeah, it would be good also for if you do a YouTube campaign, so you would know, okay, what I'm going to start with and mix with the audience, and you follow your funnel with it. It's also useful for that. I guess what kind of video you would want.
On that only, I don't know if you remember the framework that we have, the Educate framework. So that one, I've taken that framework just for example, like any hook, problem, solution, and then you put a credential and then a call to action. It's like the basic framework that is there. You put it in. If you have an intense framework, like follow these steps, and you put that framework in, and and then ask Google to fill in variations of hook, problems, and then solution, and then a credential part of it. So it can really help in creating the video. And then you take that, as Oli said, that give me a prompt to create a text to video, and then you put it in there. And so,
yeah,
I think they're already living in 2040 or 2030 or something.
The thing I found most helpful with stuff like that is having a really strong like ICP or persona profile. Like I'll usually feed that in first, like who we're trying to target, what keeps them up at night, what are their goals. And if we have really cool language there that is based off the customer's language, that really helps coming up with very good outputs.
Business owners tend to think that there's only speaking to people exactly like them, people who are super familiar with what they do, who are experts in the same field. Whereas in most cases, that's not actually the case. They might say, oh, well, I don't actually need everyone to know what I'm doing or to understand what I'm doing, because people in my field understand it. Like I'm going to use these complicated words and this complicated messaging that nobody knows really what it means, because it sounds very professional. I mean, it's not really the best thing to do for your business. We've talked about this in the past together, that the human element is so much more important than just numbers and statistics and tests, etc. But what I found is that people, it's very difficult for them to be objective about their own thing, like their own websites and their own funnels. So it's a lot more difficult for them to take a look and see the big picture and identify issues themselves. So what people can actually do is run a test with a friend, family, ideally someone who's part of your target audience, but if you don't have contacts with anyone like this, you can just have a friend and show them your website or show them your funnel for 15 seconds. 15 seconds, that's it. And then ask them, what did they learn? What is it that I do? What is the offer? What did you find out? If they cannot tell you the basics of like, what is it? How much it costs, or what does it do? What is the problem that it solves? No matter if you're a service-based business or a product-based business, then it's very likely that you have a problem with your funnel, because 15 seconds might seem like very little time, but it's actually so much time, because people's attention span nowadays is so short that 15 seconds should be enough for them to skim through your entire content and understand all of the basics of your offer. So this is the simplest thing that you can do to see if you have a problem, because just 15 seconds. That's all.
Yeah. I remember like when I was doing a lot of ads, like editing and design work, it was very much, will my mom understand this? And can she read at this
Exactly.
pace? Like there's a tendency when at least doing captions back in the day before CapCut and all these things that paced along, it was very much a lot of times captions would go on too fast. And it's like, I don't think my mom could read at this speed.
Mhm.
And I think that's the number one tool as a marketer is ask your mom to check out your work.
To gain insights that I think are truly valuable, you need to be able to isolate, one thing at a time and see what's.
And sometimes it's like none of it. Like there's been times where it's like all of it's about the same. This is just the performance we're getting, and then we can relax a bit on, coming up with new stuff and maybe expanding into other. Let's look at the offer, or let's look at something else because we've optimized it. We're good.
Yeah. And I think sometimes those ads, like the unicorn ads that you continue to run, like another factor that we have no control over is how much is the engagement actually what's pulling the results on that.
Right.
Maybe there's some really stellar comments in that comment section that are really selling people on this thing because people
it's true.
saying, this was a great program. This changed my life, what have you. And then it kind of keeps compounding that way. There's so many elements, but I think, having a sense of what you're testing and why, and what you're looking for, what insights you're hoping to glean, whether it's, is of these 3 copy variations, which one is, really going to hit home, or, maybe it's a creative. It's good to have in mind because it is so tempting to just throw some stuff up at the wall and see what happens. And as you advance, I think it's helpful to get those insights a little bit more fine-tuned.
Yep.
Cool. Let's see. I think another one here, kind of a bit in that same vein as we're talking about hooks and angles, is just that deep understanding of your audience pain points and objectives, like really diving into that audience psyche. And maybe that's another thing that you revisit from time to time in various ways. And that could be its own blog post, really, like, how to do that audience research, whether it's looking at your reviews, looking at your comments in your ads, looking at your competitors, etc.
Customer surveys. We've talked about that before, of asking them, getting voice of the customer feedback, actually pulling in their language, and of course the CAMP framework and some of the pillar work and deep dive stuff we do also goes through the psychology of awareness levels and things like that. But it definitely requires more than just, I know my audience.
It's so tempting to do that too, but I think the deep understanding is necessary. And as you say, getting into CAMP, just talking to your audience in the place that they are, in the way you need to speak to them, whether, maybe they have no idea what your business is or who you are, etc. Or maybe they do. And maybe they have some objections that you need to be handling that maybe wouldn't have occurred to somebody who's, completely cold traffic, but, occurred further down the line. So I think that's, it's such a stellar framework that we have with CAMP. And I think it's so necessary to know that you can't talk to, a level 1 person the same way as when you're trying to induce somebody, who's either maybe hit add to cart but didn't purchase, or, signed up for your lead magnet but never went further. Like there's a lot more things in play there. That you need to be addressing in your ads. That might be too much. That could even be a turnoff to a level 1 person.
Oh, absolutely. Or it's not where they're at. Like,
exactly.
I find when I look at accounts, look at clients, and even just what I know of business owners, usually their first tendency is to go to that solution aware, sales oriented, buy now copy. And this is everybody from the service people to the e-commerce. Of course, e-commerce is more like you get that, but they want to go right to the sale. And so, but only 10%, maybe if you're lucky, 20% at most. Super lucky. It's more like 10 or less are ready to buy now. So you're leaving huge swathes of your audience. And I think beginners do this too often, where they go right to the sales oriented stuff and don't feel like they have the time to go back and do, like, for e-commerce, like product demonstrations, or do a testimonial, or for service people addressing objections, or getting desire aware, like wants and aspirations. Oh, that's a mistake I see with early people. I don't know if that's
yeah,
what
and
you
even
see?
Facebook will do its best to grab those low hanging fruit, people who are ready to buy, so you might get lucky and you might get a lot of the results you're looking for initially, but it's going to run out. And if you're not warming up, new people to come into that state, then it's going to get tricky eventually. And
it won't scale. There's a point where it will stop scaling.
Precisely. Yeah.
So Ralph, maybe hit on cost per content a little bit, and Landon, I'd be curious your perspective on if this would be a valuable way to kind of present like the amount and differentiation you need for clients.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a hard pill for some businesses to swallow because they realize, well, wait a second, I have to spend money now that might not get the payoff 6 months from now. So, and then with attribution being the way that it is right now on all the platforms, it's harder to measure. I don't really even know, like if I start producing videos like these guys say on the customer acquisition show, like what is that? I'm not going to see anything from that for a while. Like it's going to depend on what your customer life cycle is. But I do think that the new paradigm really is not necessarily CPA. It's cost per content. And the reason I'm saying that is that as long as you have tools in which to measure it, or at least to get close to measuring it, so that you understand which content at the very, very top end of the funnel, the ones that are not converting. This is like this show is an example of that. This is very meta, without saying meta like Mark Zuckerberg meta. Like this show is part of this whole concept. If you notice like how we're actually doing this, we are not pitching tier 11. Well, if you want to go buy tier 11 stuff and set an appointment and go to our call to action, and you're going to end up talking to me, by the way, because I'm the new sales guy this week. Great. But that's not the purpose of this show. The purpose of this show is to create content to create your audience. Your content then creates the audience at a very, very top level. Like people will value that content, or maybe it speaks to a pain point or to a desire, and they say, oh, I identify with that person. But this might be the first touch point that they get into, a show called the Customer Acquisition Show, which isn't even branded to our brand. Like this is almost the way that it needs to be done. It's like Athletic Greens didn't do it through like the Athletic Greens page. They did it through Joe Rogan. They did it through, I forget what the name of their page was, but they basically have pages which is purely educational content. And then it just indoctrinated them in. And then through the beauty of retargeting and through capturing audiences, you can then start to sort of slowly take them down that pathway. We call it the customer acquisition path. Some people call it the customer journey, ultimately to a sale. And that's the way that humans normally buy stuff. And I know, Tom, you have the Flowbee example. I have the Remarkable 2 example of people who've listened to the podcast. It's like they took me on this great journey, and I was fascinated by how it all worked to ultimately buy a $600 thing that I now use like all the time. And here it is, like right here. I'm using it every single day. The point is I didn't know who the hell they were 3 months ago. And now it's an indispensable part of my life. Like if you can do that, and I think Remarkable 2 does it really well. And I think a lot of brands like AG1, I think does it well. All of a sudden this becomes a different paradigm shift, and you're not necessarily the CPA, the goal at the end, like it's got to make financial sense. It's got to return from an ad spend perspective. But as soon as you go tippy top of the funnel, like top, like brand awareness, reach, a lot of these campaigns that have nothing to do with conversion, video views, we even do it sort of in a mid funnel at a consideration kind of campaign with like link clicks, like, or traffic now is what it's called, is like you have to measure all of that. And I think cost per content is the new paradigm that from my perspective, it now measures your efficiency in being able to produce the right types of content. And ultimately, how does that lead to your customer acquisition cost? It now flips the paradigm from pure website conversion campaigns, which, as we know, for pretty much any industry, You know, the CPMs in those campaigns are going to be $30, $40, $50. But as soon as you go into the brand awareness and the reach campaigns or video view campaigns, which is like really what we're talking about here, top of funnel content that's not salesy, it's helpful and useful, you're looking at CPMs that are like $3, $4, $5. So if you blend it all together to ultimately get to your ultimate goal, which is to hit your KPIs and your metrics, using cost per content as an indicator on the front end is a very smart way of looking at your business.
What are some of the more common issues you've run into or seen the most, I guess, with some of your accounts when it comes to like building out a strategy or making a strategy work? Or maybe something that a client has brought up that you've seen before. What are some of the things we could talk about here, just issues that somebody making a strategy might run into?
I think from like the top of my head, like if a product is not selling, the client pushes to advertise it. And that really like makes it difficult to build a strategy around a product that might not actually be working for them, and they're wanting to push it and the focus is not in the right place. So yeah, that's kind of like a bit of a hindrance, I would say.
Yeah, we talked about that, I think with Lynn on one episode here of building like an effective offer. And I think that's a huge, not problem, but it's definitely something that makes it harder to build a strategy around. Like you said, when you have an offer that isn't great or is missing pieces, it's really hard to build an effective ad strategy around that because, I mean, your offer's not good. You're trying to sell something that effectively is not good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think something that I've seen as well is when the customer has in their head of how they want to talk about their product or service, or even just how their brand is, and then we come to them with, well, this is what your audience might need to see or want to see. And that disconnect of like, well, we don't want to say that, or we don't want to do like native UGC because it's not beautiful aesthetic. And trying to communicate that and show them that this is like what we should do is sometimes a bit difficult because they sometimes have a hard time letting go of what they think should be said versus what their audience wants to hear.
That's an interesting point. My personal belief on being a creative strategist is that the most important part of your job isn't making sure things look pretty. It's not creating images or videos yourself. It's actually the research that goes into it up front. Like that drives everything. And not just researching, the client and their product, like their offers, anything like that, but also researching their audiences. That's a great point you made. Like a client may not feel like their audience thinks a certain way or wants to see something presented, a specific way, but their audience may be saying the exact opposite. And that like something that doesn't align with the client's thoughts might be aligning perfectly with the audience.
What are some of the things that we really are finding lately within the brand awareness and building brand for some of our clients?
Well, that's a big question.
Yeah.
Following on from the last week's show with Ralph and Landon, I think it's clear that we have this inflection point in online advertising where, look, brand advertising has always been important. It's always been important to find your audiences, or actually even create your audiences, finding those solution unaware people who don't even know you exist and making them aware of who you are. Because one way of defining a brand is the sum of awareness, how many people are aware you exist, and the associations, how they associate with you, or what they associate to your business. But with online advertising, ever since conversion tracking was invented, the ability to actually spend money on advertising and know how much money you're making back, for a long time that didn't exist. So we had this period where Meta ads launched around 2000, I don't know the exact, I think it was 2012 around then. There was no conversion tracking. Then conversion tracking was introduced. The corporate world didn't take meta advertising seriously for a long time, probably not until the later part of the 2010s. So we had this ridiculously cheap inventory. You had businesses born overnight, people creating, certain kinds of food processors or some little invention in the house, and then overnight, almost, they're advertising on Facebook and creating businesses. Those days, those golden days, unfortunately, we're in a new age now where the inventory on the ad platforms, both Meta ads and Google, for conversions, is super, super saturated. And in order to grow, we're working with some clients who are at that point where they've scaled, just purely focusing on direct response conversions. But where do they go now? How do they reach an audience which they know is out there? But it's probably the way to reach those people is not through continually focusing on conversions. So that's what we're seeing with some clients. We have a client in they're an educational, they basically sell training and software for helping people become credit consultants. And super exciting account, Landon and Federico. I've worked on this account too, but Landon and Federico have worked really extensively on this account and helped them grow. But they're actually in this stage now where they're like, where do we go next? How do we reach more people?
Yeah, I think there's like Nick said, it's an incredibly big topic. It's an incredibly controversial topic, especially with like diehard performance marketers, diehard direct response marketers, where, you want to be able to track and record everything. But we're coming to a day and age where media is just different. There is so many platforms out there. There is so much content vying for people's attention that the game has just changed. And you tack on the decreased ability to track with like the iOS 14 privacy updates, the upcoming iOS 17 updates. We're losing the ability to get this nice, clean data and track people. So this is where we have to start to adapt our approach to marketing. And just like, the inflection of having a platform like Meta was a massive game changer. But now people have kind of caught on. Like, it's not unfamiliar to businesses. So we need to start to adapt our strategy to go, okay, competition is extremely high in almost every niche and vertical that I see. Competition is fierce. So how can we now start to differentiate ourselves and start to grow beyond that? And that's where we kind of start to dive into this conversation around kind of like brand marketing.
Yeah, I think that's the whole idea, even of inventory being like this scarce resource on these platforms. Oftentimes we act like Meta is just charging, like creating scarcity where none exists because they have unlimited inventory. But really, this is Meta charging you for their brand, because if they become known as a brand that is just pushing DR or conversion ads one after another into their feed, their brand becomes associated with it. So they're charging us for how we are utilizing their brand, and they want to make sure that they're protecting their brand, where it's not just about advertising, but it is about the experience for customers. And I think maybe that's one of the a segue, something that we can talk about a little bit further, is like, how does brand advertising expand the experience for the customer?
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I think branding is interesting because when we talk about it in this context of like performance marketing, it sometimes seems like a foreign concept. But when we start to just branch out and learn what other industries and what other companies have been doing since the dawn of time, we see so many instances of how powerful brand is. And just like you said, we wouldn't be here having this conversation about Meta ads if Meta hadn't built one of the biggest brands in the world. So like right there, that's the power of brand marketing. Like, they built this massive company. If you look at somebody like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, worth like $1 billion, why can he create a tequila company or, partner with Under Armour and do all of those types of things and create massive success? It's because of brand. So when we talk about it in terms of like performance marketing and moving from just pure direct response, we know that there's a finite people that are ready to purchase at any given time. And we, at some point in time, at some level of spend with our advertising dollars, we're going to saturate that market. So let's say you might be able to spend $50,000 a month with just rapid growth, and there's going to be a point of diminishing returns on, let's say, Meta ads. And then, okay, well, now maybe you diversify and you add in Google ads, maybe you add in TikTok ads. You're still going to hit an inflection point where there's diminishing returns because that pool that you're trying to go after is small. Brand expands that by going, we're going to expand that pool of people that are ready to purchase. We're going to go out into that broader market and start to capture people and bring them to the point of knowing who our brand is and wanting to purchase from us. So that's kind of where this conversation of how does it actually bring more people to purchase from us. If we think of like the traditional funnel concept of like bringing people to that point of making that purchase, we're just bringing more people into the top of that funnel. And that's kind of how I look at brand advertising in like a very oversimplistic way.
Measurement doesn't go away. I think one of the scary things for businesses who are, okay, look, we want to grow our brand, we want to invest in brand advertising. There can almost be this concept of, well, okay, we're going to take this portion of our marketing budget, invest it in brand advertising, but there's no way of knowing if it's working. We're just going to invest this and pray and have faith, which is very fluffy for any business owner. So, looking at some of the measurement strategies, this is what shifts. So a lot of businesses in our, in the range of clients we work with who may have, annual revenue between 1 million on the lower end to anywhere up to like 100 million on the top end, this still is a significant investment. Now, investing in focus groups, things like this using traditional market research methods still may not be practical because of the cost involved. However, Meta now has tools for measuring the impact, the business impacts of brand advertising, conversion lift, brand lift, power lift studies, which will take sample sizes in the market and give you data on how much awareness has grown, how many people are actually aware. And there's different methods they use to do this. And you can do the same thing for consideration. So that takes an understanding of how awareness and consideration is going to impact your business. There is a widely used, accepted theory that your share of voice in the advertising in the market roughly equates to your market share. So if you want 10% market share in your market, your overall advertising, and that's all channels, should be roughly equivalent to 10% share of voice. So in certain fields, just say you have competitors who are you may have competitors who are advertising on TV, billboards, out of home, which again have these massive marketing budgets. But we find a lot of our clients, their main competitors are in a similar position. They're advertising online. So it really comes down to having a similar share of voice for advertising online, and but also being able to measure that. I think once the measurement aspect is in place, business owners feel a lot more comfortable, bringing this to the CFO or bringing this and saying, okay, this investment makes sense.
All right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Customer Acquisition Show and that you got something out of some of our favorite segments that you can apply to your marketing today. As always, if you're interested in learning more about Tier 11 or partnering with us to grow your business, head over to tier11.com and look for that big pink button. And we'll see you next week at the same time, at the same place for another episode of the Customer Acquisition Show.